All right, a push. Here we go. 4.2 political parties in the era of Jefferson. If you were absent or you just want to review these topics, I'm going to run through them here briefly. And yeah, here we go. So, first things first, we need to look at the College Board learning objectives. All right, and let me run through these very quickly. The United States began to develop a modern democracy, celebrated a new culture, while Americans sought to define the nation's democratic ideals and change their society and institutions to match them. So the nation's transition to a more participatory democracy was achieved by expanding suffrage. At this time, suffrage is going to be we're going to kind of get into that. So let me not jump ahead here. So systems based on property ownership to one based on a voting of all adult white men, whether you own property or not, you can still participate. And it was accompanied by the growth of political parties. While Americans embraced a new national culture, various groups are going to develop their distinctive cultures of their own based on their geographical locations. All right, we're going to call this regionalism and sectionalism, depending on their location. So, increasing numbers of Americans, many inspired by new religious and intellectual movements, worked primarily outside of government institutions to advocate their ideas. And this is going to be a very successful thing. So innovations in technology, agriculture, commerce powerfully are going to accelerated the American economy, precipitating profound changes in U.S. society and national and regional identities. Okay, a few more here. So new transportation systems and technologies dramatically expanded manufacturing and agricultural production. Changes are going to be caused by the market revolution, had significant effects on U.S. society, workers' lives, gender, and family relations. So we're going to see a change in that. Economic developments shaped settlement and trade patterns, helping to unify the nation while also encouraging growth of different regions. So the U.S. interest in increasing foreign trade and expanding its national borders shaped the nation's foreign policy and spurred government and private initiatives. So struggling to create independent global presence, the United States sought to claim territory through the whole North American continent, and promote foreign trade. So the United States acquisition of lands in the West is going to give this rise of contest over the extension of slavery into the territories. Is it something that the country wants? Is it something the country doesn't want? Can we even agree on this? We're going to find out. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna talk about here that we discussed is democracy and the national identity. So in the early 19th century, the United States began to develop a more inclusive form of democracy, and it celebrated a growing national culture. We're really starting to have this self-identity. Before we were kind of this child or, family kind of cultural branch of Great Britain. And now we're going to have our own independent cultural identity based on our young, short history. And we're going to be able to pick kind of where we want to go. So, as Americans sought to define the nation's democratic values, they also worked to reshape their society and institutions to reflect these principles. All right. The US moved towards a more inclusive democratic system while embracing new ideals of this individual liberty, national identity. All right. We have the individual liberty to do what you want. No sort of familial status or restrictions. Like if you want to go out and do something, you can do it. And we also have our own national identity. All right, we're not affiliated with Britain anymore. We're not a British colony. We're our own nation, and we got to establish that on the world stage and on the domestic stage. America began to celebrate their distinctive culture, and we're going to develop our own literature, our own art, our own political thought on things. So efforts to align the nation's institution with democratic ideals is going to spark debates over equality, rights, the structure of our society. Let's take a look here. So let me give you an example. So the works of authors like Washington Irving and artists from the Hudson River School are going to help create a unique American cultural identity from European traditions. So before we had this huge European influence. British primarily, the fact that we were a British colony, but other European things like German and French and so on. But we're going to start to have our own individualism and decide like who are we as a country and what sort of cultural norms do we want to have. All right. So major things going to happen in this election of 1800. So it's a pivotal movement in U.S. history. So it's going to set the stage for American politics in the early 19th century. So this election is often referred to as the Revolution of 1800. All right. We had the Revolutionary War following the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So we're going to have another one. And it's going to be this election. It's going to result in the first peaceful transfer of power between political parties, establishing key precedent for this young republic called the United States of America. So the election of 1800 saw a highly contested race between the Federalist incumbent, John Adams, and the Democratic Republican candidate, Thomas Jefferson. Hopefully these two names sound familiar. All right. Completely politically different figures in what they believe. Great friends during the founding period and the times where we were drafting the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson and Adams were great friends and got along very well. But once we start to see this development of political parties, they're going to kind of go their separate ways. They're also going to get much older in age and a bit more I guess the best way to say is they get more ornery as they age. So the election demonstrated the strength of the U.S. constitutional system as power is finally peacefully transferred from the Federalists to the Democratic Republicans, despite the intense political divisions at the time. All right, they really don't get along. They don't agree. But the constitutional provision of the transfer peaceful or the transfer of power peacefully, it works, and we weren't sure of this that it was going to work. I mean, you got to think of what had happened in Europe in prior decades and hundreds of years in Europe and around the world when a monarch or a ruler would either die, abdicate from power, which means to kind of give power away or step down. Then there's this battle from different people on who's going to take control, who's going to be in power. So if a king in Europe passed away, there's going to be these different lords that are going to fight for who has control if that monarch didn't have any sort of direct descendant. And even if they did have a direct descendant, sometimes there could be these fights. So the fact that this young nation can have a leader and that leader can then leave peacefully to the next leader, especially when they disagree fundamentally and politically, it's an amazing thing. So this is going to shape how American politics is going to carry out for the next several decades. And let me give you an example of how this worked. So the tied electoral vote between Jefferson and Aaron Burr, they're both Democratic Republican candidates, which was resolved by the House of Representatives in Jefferson's favor after 36 ballots. So the election of 1800 was not without controversy. So Jefferson and Burr both are a part of the same party, and they received an equal number of electoral votes. So throwing the election to the House of Representatives, and they're going to finally choose a president, ends up being Jefferson. And so some political compromises need to be made. So this election marked a decline, too, of the Federalist Party and the rise of this Jeffersonian ideals, which would shape how American politics for the next several decades are going to be shaped. So you have to understand the difference between these Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. So the Federalists are going to support more of these Northeastern types, like the manufacturing owners, the industry owners, the bankers, the more wealthy individuals, while the Democratic Republicans are going to appeal more to the common man or the farmer and the agrarian type, which is synonymous with farmers. All right, means the same thing. So here's our guy Jefferson. Looking good, looking very presidential. All right, so let's dive in deep more onto what I mean by these Jeffersonian ideals, and I really like that word. Anytime we can have a good buzzword, it's good. So with Thomas Jefferson's victory in the election of 1800, it's going to set some new ideals, often referred to as Jeffersonian democracy, and it's going to begin to shape how our politics are going to work going forward. So these ideals emphasize the importance of limited government, agrarianism. Remember, that's that farm sort of lifestyle where I live on a farm. I live and grow my own things. I have maybe some livestock, maybe some garden crops. And when I have all those things, it makes me self-sufficient, and that ensures that I have full individual liberty and that nobody's going to infringe upon my lifestyle. So Jefferson has this vision for democracy, and he really is going to prioritize rights of the individual, particularly the yeoman farmer, as the foundation. So the farmer is going to be that common man, and he's the foundation of the American society. So he's going to advocate for a smaller federal government with limited executive powers and strict interpretation of the Constitution. All right, he's afraid that if we give too much power to the executive, the president, that things can get out of hand. They can, call certain shots and do things that maybe aren't fully constitutional. So we need to limit that power. And we want to really have a strict interpretation of the Constitution as it is written, because he felt that when it was drafted, that we meant what we said, word for word. That's what he thought. So Jefferson's policies emphasized states' rights and sought to reduce that influence of federal government in everyday life. All right. Big government is bad for the common man, bad for the citizen. And we need to really reduce the size of it, and that states should have rights, and strong rights. And that when small government exists, the everyday citizen is going to have more autonomy, more power. So this is contrasting with the more centralized approach that the Federalist administration under John Adams was trying to carry out. So here we go. Let's have an example. Jefferson's reduction of the size of the federal government and the military is going to be reflecting his commitment to a limited federal role in governments. All right. So key things here. All right. Big government is expensive. Standing army is expensive as well. And he also felt like, why do we need this huge military standing and ready? It's expensive. And who are you fighting? We haven't declared war on anybody. We don't really have any enemies. And that might be dangerous in case that military, turned on the everyday citizen. So he didn't like that idea. All right, and here's a depiction of what that yeoman farmer would look like. All right, politics are going to change. We have this shifting political landscape. So the election of 1800 not only marked a change in our political leadership, but it also reshaped the American party system, with the Democratic Republicans emerging as the dominant force. All right, they have really gathered a following. All right, you have to understand that during this time, there's far more farmers in the country, and agrarian types of people, than there are these manufacturing industry owners. So really, you have to appeal to the majority, to appeal to the majority of voters that you have. So it's going to be the dominant force in national politics for not a short time. For several decades, the Democratic Republicans are going to control the executive, and they're going to control the legislative branch of government, winning elections in both of those categories. All right, so the Federalist Party, which had dominated national politics under George Washington and John Adams. Remember, Washington's a Federalist, John Adams is a Federalist. So they're going to begin to decline after the election in 1800, struggling to recover from its loss of power. The Democratic Republican Party under Jefferson's leadership is going to consolidate its influence, dominated American politics during what became known as this era of good feeling. Everybody's feeling great. People are happy with the direction that the country is going, and it becomes a very good thing for everyone. So there's an absence of partisan conflict um, between the government as the Federalists continued to decline and the Democratic Republicans enjoyed huge amounts of support. So they were able to get lots of things done because of a weak Federalist Party that didn't have the sheer numbers to oppose them. Okay. Um, Now let's continue on here. All right. The election set the precedent again for that peaceful transition of power between political parties. This is a hallmark of U.S. democratic system. All right. Whether we agree or disagree with a newly elected president, we have to have that peaceful transition of power in this system of government. Okay. In the current day and age, 4-year term. Once that 4-year term is done, a new president becomes sworn in on January 20th, and power has been transferred. They go up during inauguration. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court swears them in to their 4-year term. So as prescribed by the Constitution. So the example, let's take a look. The Federalists' loss of control over both the executive and those legislative branches are going to signal a shift towards Democratic Republican dominance in the early 19th century. All right, they're going to have control for quite some time. And this is a great illustration that I like for the era of good feeling. Everybody's kind of jolly, happy, and everybody's having a good time. So a more participatory democracy is going to allow for some expansion of suffrage. So a key element of Americans' transition to a more modern democracy was the expansion of suffrage. So by moving from a system based on property ownership to one based on voting for all white men. Okay, originally you had to own property, you had to be a white man to vote. Those were the conditions. All right, now we're moving in a positive direction, slow but positive. Now all white men can vote. All right, and this is important. And I know some people might think, well, now it's just white men. Well, we have to set a direction, a forward direction. It is slow, could be frustrating, but it's important because the nation's political system became more inclusive, so leading to the growth of political parties. So when these political parties grow in the early republic, only property owning men could vote. So, but by the 1820s, the suffrage is going to expand and include all adult white men. So we're gaining more voters, gaining more people participating in the democratic processes. So this expansion of voting rights, it's going to lead to the political system and increased participation in elections and how we decide our nation's going to be governed. So this rise of political parties, particularly the Democratic Party, so you're going to see a break eventually with that Democratic Republican, and we'll talk about that more. Yeah, they're together, but they'll end up breaking up. So under Andrew Jackson, and the Whig Party mobilized this new electorate, this new group of voters. All right, so we had a small group. Now the group of voters is getting bigger, and it's turning into more people participating in democracy. So another example is that election of 1828 is going to mark a shift towards mass political participation, a huge amount of people participating. So with Andrew Jackson's campaign focusing on appealing to the common man, and you might be thinking, who's the common man? Common man's going to be farmers, laborers, frontiersmen who had previously been excluded from politics. All right. The Whig Party formed in opposition to Jackson, represented different interests, but also sought to engage a growing electorate. So whether they disagreed or agreed, they wanted to still engage a larger group of voters. So the competition between these two parties are going to grow this American political participation. So Jackson's victory is going to demonstrate the power of running this populist style campaign and really appealing to voters. Okay, great picture here is going to show a large number of people getting in line to fill out a ballot and cast their votes. Some didn't really have that right before, so everybody's excited to feel included in this new style of government. So national unity and distinctive cultures, all right? Let's talk about that. So we need to talk about how we unified and how we had a distinctive culture unlike anything we've ever seen. So as Americans embraced a new national culture, various groups within this nation developed their own distinctive cultural identities. So reflecting the diversity of regional, religious, social experiences across the United States. While a shared national culture began to emerge, groups such as Southern planter elite, Northern industrialists, and frontier settlers developed their own ways of life. All right, they're all going to have different characteristics. They're not the same, and they're gonna have a different way of life, different way of living. Okay. Religious movements such as the Second Great Awakening also shaped the development of regional and cultural identities. So that's going to be one. It's going to shape this way America is going to develop in certain regions and certain cultures. So, what is the Second Great Awakening? A Protestant revival movement is going to have this huge impact on how American society is inspiring both individual moral reform, and they're going to have this collective, what we call social activism. All right. So this revival movement spreads around the country, but it's going to influence a particular group in the West and the South, where it shaped regional identities and kind of caused this social change. Um, and some of the things that they're going to advocate for. Before I talk about that, there's going to be some ethnic and immigrant communities, including Irish and German immigrants, contributed to that cultural diversity and nation creating their own enclaves. All right, they're going to have these own areas that they live in. That's going to be separate from other neighborhoods, right? So Germans and Irish tended to be Catholic, so they could live together. Some Germans were Protestant, but majority you had a lot of German Catholics. So they would live together because they shared some traditional values. But you would have an Irish neighborhood, a German neighborhood. So one language barrier, not everybody was able to speak to each other. They didn't have a common language. So that's why they would create these enclaves and didn't always fully assimilate with one another. So let me give you an example. The distinct Southern culture was based on plantation agriculture and hierarchical social order, contrasted sharply with this industrializing North focused on commerce and more fluid social structure. All right. So what that means is they're different. The Southern culture believed in this agricultural lifestyle, and they had a hierarchy. You know, men being at the very top. Um, yeah, you had the men being at the very top, women being somewhere below those men, and slaves were at the very, very bottom. Sadly, they didn't have any rights at all. Very, very little. So let's move on here. All right, so you can see this is a good picture of immigrants, and they're being taken off of the ships and moving inland. All right, let's dive into what these reform movements included. All right. So, in addition to the changes happening within the political sphere, many Americans were inspired by new religious and intellectual movements to work outside of government. So, they were inspired and they thought that, hey, we don't need a Congress to always, promote change, or we don't need to elect a president to always promote change. We can make these social movements to make the change that we want. All right. And one of those reform movements, the big one is the Second Great Awakening. So you have this religious revival movement inspired by many Americans to address these social changes. All right, what are the social changes that they wanted? They wanted a temperance, which is the reduction in consumption of alcohol. They wanted abolition, so the abolition of slavery, and they wanted to end slavery, and they had these movements for implementing more of women's rights. So let's take a look here at these next things. So intellectual movements, including these transcendentalism, encouraged individuals to seek personal improvement and social reforms, often outside of those traditional channels of government. So these movements led to the rise of reform organizations, advocacy groups, and volunteer associations dedicated to advancing these specific causes, such as the abolition of slavery, the expansion of educational opportunities. Those were their key goals. So, example, the rise of abolitionist movement. With leaders like William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass, they're going to be advocating for the immediate end of slavery and spurred on both a religious point of view, like it's religiously wrong that we do this, but they're also going to look at it from a moral perspective, that it's just inhumane and morally wrong. All right, and here's Frederick Douglass, amazing speaker. His words are deeply resonating. So hopefully we get to read some of his stuff in this course. All right, so technology and economic transformations. All right, so alongside the political and social changes, innovations in technology and agriculture and commerce powerfully accelerated the American economy. So these transformations brought profound change to U.S. society and reshaped both national and regional identity. So the invention of new technologies like that cotton gin and the steam engine revolutionized how agriculture and industry could grow. So increasing productivity, that's important. So now that I have these technological advancements, my productivity is going to increase. And this is going to cause the economy to get bigger, because when I can produce more, I can produce more goods, I can produce more money. And it's just up and up and up and grow, grow, grow. Okay. So these innovations contributed to the development of a market style economy. So what I can produce, I can then bring to market and I can sell. And it also is going to link different regions of the country through commerce and trade. All right. So the growth of manufacturing in the north and the expansion of plantation agriculture in the south helped to decline distinct, or it helped to define distinct regional identities while also fostering national unity through trade networks and shared economic interests. So, example, all right, the construction of the Erie Canal in 1825. All right, this is going to facilitate the transportation of goods between the Midwest and the East Coast. So, integrating regional economies were important in accelerating commerce. So, if you take a look here at this picture, you have the Erie Canal, so the Hudson River. They kind of dig this canal going through New York State and down to Erie, so that they could trade between the Great Lakes regions all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. So manufacturing and agriculture, let's hit the key things we need to understand about this. So in that early 19th century, new transportation systems and technological advancements revolutionized how manufacturing and agriculture in the United States happened. These innovations not only increase productivity, but also transform the economic landscape of the nation. So the development of canals, railroads, and steamboats dramatically expanded transportation networks, making it easier for me to, or make it them, I shouldn't say me, move goods and people across the country. Technological innovations like the cotton gin, invented by the one and only Eli Whitney, um, revolutionized agriculture by making cotton production more efficient. All right. And efficiency is very important, right? I got to be efficient. The more efficient I am, the better returns, the better money that I can make. So the expansion of transportation and production capacity boosted manufacturing, especially in the north, while allowing farmers in the south and west to access larger markets. Okay. That's our example. The Erie Canal, completed in 1825, is going to connect the Great Lakes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, significantly lowering transportation costs, and fueling economic growth in the Midwest and the East. All right, whether I'm using trains to move things around, whether I'm hiring horse-drawn carriage, transport transport goods back and forth, there's a cost associated with that. And if I'm doing it by land and I'm doing it in a way longer route, that gets expensive. So if I can shorten the route, make the route more efficient by using things like the Erie Canal, I've cut down my costs. When I cut down my costs, I have bigger profits. So that's why this is appealing. And here's our guy, Eli Whitney. All right, market revolutions. So the market revolution brought about sweeping changes to the US society, profoundly affecting workers' lives, family dynamics, and gender roles as the nation transitioned from a largely agrarian, remember that's farm economy, to a market-based economy. So there is this market revolution that happens, and it characterized by this expansion of commerce and this rise of factories, shifted the US from local subsistent based economy to more of a national market style economy. Um, Workers experienced new patterns of labor, often leaving home based production for factory work, which introduced wage labor, right? I go in, I give you my labor, now you give me a wage, you give me money as a return. And this is going to create work schedules. Gender and family relations were impacted as men increasingly worked outside the home, while women's roles began to shift, with some women actually entering the workforce. Whoops, I think I skipped ahead a little bit here. So while some women are going to enter the workforce, especially in textile mills and others, focusing on and others are going to focus on more of that cult of domesticity. A lot of them wanted to stay home. All right, not all women wanted to work. A lot of them wanted to attend to their agrarian stuff, their farm life, raise their children. They didn't want to participate. All right, but some did, um, and some were successful that did. So let me give you this example here. So the low mill girls in Massachusetts, who were among the first women to work in industrial factories, demonstrated both the opportunity and challenges that the market revolution presented for women's roles in society. All right, so they're going to participate, but there's going to be some challenges, and we'll continue to learn about what those are. All right, we'll finish here with a few more. So growth and regional development. So the rapid economic development of the United States shaped the settlement patterns and trade networks across the country. These changes help to unify the nation while also fostering growth of this distinctive regional economy. So the expansion of transportation infrastructure, such as railroads, canals, are going to facilitate this movement of goods between regions, integrating regional economies into national markets. All right. What you need to understand is that trade networks developed between regions is going to be a key thing that helps to unify the nation economically. Though regional differences in labor systems and economies would also lead to growing tensions, right? How we decide to have labor practices, how we decide to compensate and pay wages is going to be different in different regions. So people forget this is a huge amount of land that we're inhabiting in the United States. in comparison to other European countries. It's huge. These regions themselves are sometimes larger than some European nations. So America is very spread out, and that's how we get these certain cultural differences. Let me give you this example: the growth of Midwestern cities like Chicago, which became important trade hubs for agricultural products. So this is going to link those Western farmers with Eastern industrial markets through railroads and canal systems. And I like this illustration here that shows the map of Chicago in 1833. You have Lake Michigan where shipping and can go up into the Chicago River, can offload into these different areas among the land. So, all right. So as things are getting bigger, we need to talk here about U.S. foreign policy. And foreign policy is going to be what is our policy towards how we interact with foreign nations? And as the United States sought to expand its borders and increase foreign trade, these efforts shaped the nation's foreign policy. So both government initiatives and private endeavors played these significant roles in promoting territorial expansion and securing global trade relationships. All right. We want to expand, we want to grow, but we also want to have good relationships with nations and not have them take advantage of us as a new young country. So the U.S. government pursued policies aimed at territorial expansion. And again, one of those is that Louisiana Purchase of 1803 and treaties like the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819, which is going to secure Florida from Spain. So you can kind of see how we're growing. We're adding large territories into the Union. So private initiatives such as fur trading and commercial ventures in the Pacific contributed to the United States' growing presence in the global markets. So we're connected. We're starting to establish networks of international and global trade. So U.S. Foreign policy focused on expanding trade routes and securing resources. So with efforts to establish an independent global presence through trade agreements and naval expansions. All right, let me give you an example here. The Monroe Doctrine of 1823, which is going to assert U.S. opposition against European interference in the Americas, reflecting on the nation's desire to solidify its influence in the Western Hemisphere and promote foreign trade. All right, this is our land, this is our nation. We are a sovereign nation. We get to decide who we trade with and what the conditions of that trade are going to be. And if you don't like it, then don't trade with us. And that's the fundamental thing here. And we wanted foreign nations to stay out of our business. We'll come and ask you if we want to trade with you. So the Monroe Doctrine is going to happen in 1823. All right. And this is a great political cartoon here or illustration. This is basically no trespass into the Americas. And you have these European and foreign kings over here trying to cross over, right? They have their sweaty paws ready to take advantage of this new young nation. All right. And we're like, stay out. And you can even see this guy has a weapon. He's like, stay out, or maybe you'll face a serious consequence if you don't back up. All right. So this last thing is going to be the debate over slavery. As we acquire new territories in the West, this brought a significant challenge, particularly over the question of slavery. Okay. Do we want it in these new territories? Yes, no, maybe. Is it going to create this divide? Yes, it's going to. So as settlers move westward, debates over whether to allow this slavery in the new territories becomes a central issue in U.S. policy and U.S. politics. So feeling this sectional tension, right? Different sections of the nation. Westward expansion is driven by the concept of manifest destiny. And manifest destiny is that God has ordained us to lead the acquisition of these vast territories. God has told us that it is our destiny to go out and bring out the Western world from darkness, to bring this savagery of Native American culture to light. All right. I'm not saying that is something I agree with, but that's what these people thought, right? That's what they felt was their manifested destiny, that they had to follow. All right. And we're gonna get these vast new territories, like the annexation of Texas and the Mexican American War. Um, so the annexation of Texas is going to happen in 1845, and the Mexican American War resulted in the acquisition of the southwest part of the United States. Gives us even more territory, and the debate's going to intensify because of that. So the question of whether we would permit in these new territories sparked some situations, and the first one's going to be that Missouri Compromise of 1820. And then there's going to be another compromise of 1850. All right. So the growing tensions over slavery and a series of political compromises were enacted. So the Missouri Compromise of 1820 attempted to maintain a balance, all right, between slaves and between free states by prohibiting slavery north of the 3060 latitude line in Louisiana Territory. The Compromise of 1850, meanwhile, sought to address the issue of slavery in territories acquired by Mexico. All right. We didn't want it to kind of spread over into places like Texas. All right. Unfortunately, it does. But we draw this 3060 latitude line, and it's going to allow for it to not come north. So you're going to have states like Missouri to enter the Union as a slave state, while Maine enters as a free state and bans slavery in territories north of the 3060 line, highlighting the growing divide over slavery. All right, I know this seems like a lot. This is kind of the first part, so there is a lot to cover here. And I know this video might have sounded a bit long or lasted a bit long, but we needed to hit on these topics. Going forward, the other videos will probably be a bit shorter. So again, if you feel like you don't understand these concepts, come talk to me in class. Shoot me a message, shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to clarify any of this as we move forward. So, all right, see you on the next video.